Light thinks it travels faster than anything, but it is wrong. No matter how fast light travels, it finds the darkness has always got there first and is waiting for it. In ancient times, cats were worshipped as gods. They have not forgotten this. The trouble with having an open mind, of course, is that people will insist on coming along and trying to put things in it. Build a man a fire, and he'll be warm for a day. Set a man on fire, and he'll be warm for the rest of his life. The pen is mightier than the sword if the sword is very short, and the pen is very sharp. They say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, but it's not one half so bad as a lot of ignorance. This isn't life in the fast lane. It's life in the oncoming traffic. In the beginning there was nothing, which exploded. Most gods throw dice, but fate plays chess, and you don't find out till too late that he's been playing with two queens all along. He was the sort of person who stood on mountaintops during thunderstorms in wet copper armor shouting, "All the gods are bastards. Only in our dreams are we free. The rest of the time, we need wages." 5 exclamation marks, the sure sign of an insane mind. It is often said that before you die, your life passes before your eyes. It is in fact true. It's called living. Sometimes it is better to light a flamethrower than curse the darkness. Freedom without limits is just a word. It's not worth doing something unless you were doing something that someone, somewhere, would much rather you weren't doing. The intelligence of the creature known as a crowd is the square root of the number of people in it. The harder I work, the luckier I become. The baby boomers are getting older and will stay older for longer, and they will run right into the dementia firing range. How will a society cope, especially a society that can't so readily rely on those stable family relationships that traditionally provided the backbone of care? Over the centuries, mankind has tried many ways of combating the forces of evil. Prayer, fasting, good works, and so on. Up until doom, no one seemed to have thought about the double-barrel shotgun. Eat, let, and death, demon, evolution, was far more thrilling to me than the biblical account. Who would not rather be a rising ape than a falling angel? To my juvenile eyes, Darwin was proved true every day. It doesn't take much to make us flip back into monkeys again. Opera happens because a large number of things amazingly fail to go wrong. There is a rumor going around that I have found God. I think this is unlikely because I have enough difficulty finding my keys, and there is empirical evidence that they exist. I'll be more enthusiastic about encouraging thinking outside the box when there's evidence of any thinking going on inside it. It's useful to go out of this world and see it from the perspective of another one. Anger is wonderful. It keeps you going. I'm angry about bankers, about the government. Never trust any complicated cocktail that remains perfectly clear until the last ingredient goes in, and then immediately clouds. Educational refers to the process, not the object. Although, come to think of it, some of my teachers could easily have been replaced by a cheeseburger. Everything starts somewhere, although many physicists disagree. The truth may be out there, but lies are inside your head. Mom had done everything you need to educate a kid. She made me a kid who likes books, and she told me about Wind in the Willows, and read it, and I thought, this is weird. Rat, mole, toad, and my first ever ball, she thought. You know about the wind in the willows. I think perhaps the most important problem is that we are trying to understand the fundamental workings of the universe via a language devised for telling one another when the best fruit is. Fantasy is an exercise bicycle for the mind. It might not take you anywhere, but it tones up the muscles that can. Of course, I could be wrong. If it wasn't for the fun and money, I really don't know why I'd bother. If the government ever imposes a tax on books, and I wouldn't put it past them, I'm in dead trouble. My experience in Amsterdam is that cyclists ride where the hell they like, and aim in a state of rage at all pedestrians while ringing their bell loudly. The concept of avoiding people being foreign to them. There is a soap the rich attitude in the air. A feeling that if you have a lot of money, you must have got it by some ghastly means. I can quite happily say there was never any family money. All the money we got was mine, just from writing books. Taxation is just a sophisticated way of demanding money with menaces. Discworld is taking something that you know is ridiculous and treating it as if it is serious, to see if something interesting happens when you do so. I think when people mean that Discworld books have become darker, they really mean the series is growing up. In the color of magic, most of the city is set alight. It's a joke in much the same way that the Earth is destroyed almost at the start of Douglas Adams's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Christ managed to boil down an awful lot of commandments to a few very simple rules for living. It's when you go backwards through the Begats and the Garden of Eden, and you start thinking, hang on, that's a big punishment for eating one lousy apple. There's a human rights issue. Go on, prove me wrong. Destroy the fabric of the universe. See if I care. 8 years involved with the nuclear industry have taught me that when nothing can possibly go wrong, and every avenue has been covered, that is the time to buy a house on the next continent. It seems that when you have cancer, you are a brave battler against the disease. But when you have Alzheimer's, you are an old fart. That's how people see you. It makes you feel quite alone. I'm a fantasy writer, called a fantasy writer, but there's very little, apart from 1 or 2 basic concepts in I Shall Wear Midnight, which are in fact fantasy. You have sticks that fly, but they're practical broomsticks, with a bloody great strap that you can hold onto so you don't fall off, and you try not to use them too often. In my heart, I'm just a kid from the council houses. I can remember the old cottage, and my dad coming round with the tin bath. I'm not a rich man. I got quite annoyed after the Haiti earthquake. A baby was taken from the wreckage, and people said it was a miracle. It would have been a miracle had God stopped the earthquake. More wonderful was that a load of evolved monkeys got together to save the life of a child that wasn't theirs. If you are going to write, say fantasy. Stop reading fantasy. You've already read too much. Read other things. Read westerns. Read history. Read anything that seems interesting. Because if you only read fantasy and then you start to write fantasy, all you're going to do is recycle the same old stuff and move it around a bit. The most watched program on the BBC after the news is probably Doctor Who. What has happened is that science fiction has been subsumed into modern literature. There are grandparents out there who speak Klingon, who are quite capable of holding down a job. No one would think twice now about a parallel universe. You can't die with an unfinished book. I was once a journalist, and I think of myself as a journalist, and that's it. You tell the truth. I even wrote a book called The Truth. 700,000 people who have dementia in this country are not heard. I'm fortunate I can be heard. Regrettably, it's amazing how people listen if you stand up in public and give away $1 million for research into the disease, as I have done. You can't build a plot out of jokes. You need tragic relief, and you need to let people know that when a lot of frightened people are running around with edged weaponry, there are deaths. Stupid deaths, usually. I'm not writing me a team. If there's a fight going on, people will get hurt. Not letting this happen would be a betrayal. I was a very keen reader of science fiction. I intend, before the endgame looms, to die sitting in a chair in my own garden with a glass of brandy in my hand and Thomas Tallies on the iPod. Oh, and since this is England, I had better add, if wet, in the library. Who could say that this is bad? When you read, I'm sure you don't realize that your eyes are going backwards and forwards, and to this place and that place. Mine don't do that.